Parents and family members do their best to teach children about the concept of stranger danger. But how can anyone explain to a child that sometimes it's the people closest to us that end up doing the most harm? It would be a confusing and dangerous notion to teach children not to trust anyone. But statistics show that the majority of people who harm children happens at the hands of someone that they know. This reality poses a very challenging dilemma for parents as we navigate the delicate balance between fostering trust and protecting our kids. Despite our best efforts to prepare them and even ourselves for the worst, there's nothing more powerful than basic human instinct. During a life or death situation, everything we've learned may fly out the window, leaving us with only the will to survive. When one 8-year-old little girl from Lake Worth, Florida was kidnapped, her family was terrified about the type of evil person who could have taken her. And even more disturbing, the face of the evil person who took her that may have looked far too familiar. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life. Let's jump right in.
This is 10 to Life with Elise.
Guys, I am so beyond excited to talk to you today about Beam. I've talked to you guys about it before. You already know what it is, I'm sure. For those of you who don't, it is like the sleep tea that I drink religiously. I first discovered it 7 months ago when they decided they wanted to partner with me. I was like, oh my God, yes, please. I use this stuff all the time. I love your product. So I've been like talking to you guys about Beam now for a while. But here's what I'm so excited about today, because we're doing a giveaway now. And Beam is letting me pick 3 lucky viewers to try Beam out for free. You get to pick the flavor you want, you get to pick the sleep tea you want, and it's all for free. They will ship it directly to you. Now, for those of you, again, who aren't familiar with this tea or haven't heard me talk about it, it's amazing. Sleep aids never have worked for me. Melatonin hasn't worked. Ambien hasn't worked. Valerian root hasn't worked. Nothing has worked. This has worked for me. It has magnesium. It has L-theanine. It has all of these amazing ingredients in it, and they have so many good flavors. They have sea salt caramel, which is my favorite. It tastes like hot chocolate. They have white chocolate peppermint. They have chocolate raspberry. They now have mint chip, which is like so good. They have so many flavors. And for you giveaway winners, you get to pick whatever flavor you want. So to enter the giveaway, all you have to do is look really quick right below where this video is playing. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, and then leave a comment with the timestamp of the first red flag you hear in today's case video and tell me why you want to try Beam. I will announce the winners September 1st, a week from today, and I am just so excited for you guys to try Beam. You will love it as much as I do. And for those of you who are like, I don't want to take my chances with a giveaway, I just want to try it, go ahead. I'm going to leave that link in the description for you. Use my code 10 to life to get up to 40% off your order. Also, if you do the subscription model, you get a free frother. You can cancel the subscription anytime. There's no fees, no penalties. You can pause it, all of the things. I'm going to leave all of the information for you in the description. But I am so excited because, as you guys know, I am very passionate about this product. And now I get to give 3 of you beautiful, amazing viewers and subscribers the ability to try it for free and fall in love with it too. So don't forget the rules to enter the giveaway. Look really quick, make sure you are subscribed, then leave a comment with the timestamp of the first red flag you hear in today's video, and tell me in that comment too why you want to try Beam. All right, guys, good luck. Thank you, Beam, for partnering with me on this giveaway, and thanks for just letting me sleep better every single night of my life now. All right, let's get into today's case. Years ago, it was no big deal to give a hitchhiker a ride, or lend someone your phone, or even let your kids roam around freely with their friends. But somewhere along the line, it feels like either people became less trustworthy or we all just became more aware and more cautious. Nowadays, it's really tough for people to trust strangers. It seems like we're all a little less likely to lend a hand to someone that we don't know, and most of us definitely wouldn't invite someone we don't know into our homes. However, there still are some people out there who feel compelled to help those in need, and even go so far as to make them a part of their family. Lisa Taylor from Lake Worth, Florida happens to be one of these women. Lisa has always been the type of person to help her friends in any way that she can, and she's even been known to take people in off the street when they didn't have anywhere else to go. One of Lisa's best friends' name is Michelle Humos, and the two of them have been friends since the 80s, and they were always there for each other when one of them needed the other. Lisa even opened her home to Michelle on occasion when she needed a place to stay, and as both of them had children, they became like a tight-knit chosen family for each other. At age 22, Michelle gave birth to her first child, Lachele Nance, and she gave birth to her on July 10th, 1996. Now, while all parents think that their children are special, Lachele truly was unlike any other kids her age. Not only was she absolutely beautiful, bubbly, and a sweet little girl, but she was extremely intelligent, and she had a true photographic memory. She was gifted, and the very first time that she ever heard or saw something, she would remember it forever, especially people's faces and names. Right after she was born, her mother, Michelle, made her best friend, Lisa, Lachele's godmother. She was always surrounded by positive and inspiring women, and when Michelle had to work, Lachele would spend the night over at Lisa's house, who had 3 daughters and a son of her own. Lachele grew up very close to Lisa's children as well, because she was already 16 years old by the time Michelle had another child in 2012, a son named Kyron. But even though she spent the majority of her childhood without any real siblings, they all just kind of grew up like a family. So one night in the spring of 2004, Lisa went out to her front yard when she noticed that there was someone sleeping in her car in the driveway. The car was a broken down station wagon that had been sitting there for some time, so she opened the door to confront this person. Soon, Lisa's 16-year-old son, Eddie, came outside as well, and he told his mom not to worry because he knew who it was. The person sleeping in the car was one of Eddie's friends, 17-year-old Milagro Cunningham. So Lisa told him to come inside so that they could talk about what was going on and why he was sleeping in their car. Milagro was born in the Bahamas on March 30th, 1988. When Milagro's mother gave birth, she was unfortunately battling a severe substance addiction, and it seemed like he was suffering from behavioral issues for the majority of his childhood. When he turned 15 years old, Milagro's mother decided that she could no longer deal with him, and so she decided to send him to live with an aunt in Lake Worth, Florida. She hoped that getting him away from the crowd that he was hanging out with in the Bahamas would put him on a better path. He arrived on a short-term visitor's visa, but his mother had no plans of letting him return home after the visa expired. According to his aunt and other family members in Florida, they were all a little surprised about how unemotional Milagro had been about being separated from his mother, and it wasn't long before he started to display some of the behaviors that his mother had been unable to handle on her own. On one occasion, the family ended up attending a funeral, and several family members recalled that Milagro didn't seem to know how to respond appropriately to the situation and would laugh at inappropriate times. Milagro's aunt hoped that the structure of going to school would help him, so he enrolled in the nearby John Leonard High School. However, he was soon expelled after allegedly battering a teacher and another teacher finding him in the girls' restroom. Now, I did wonder how Milagro was able to even enroll in school on an expired visitor's visa, and apparently it's not that uncommon at all. In 1982, the Supreme Court ruled that undocumented children and young adults have the same rights as U.S. citizens and as permanent residents to attend public primary and secondary schools, regardless of their immigration status. In fact, undocumented children are required by law to go to school just like any other child, regardless of their status. It also says that a state may not deny access to public education to any child, including children who do not have immigration documentation, and school districts may not request information about the citizenship or immigration status of students or their families. So even if a child doesn't have paperwork like a birth certificate or a social security card, as long as they have some sort of way to prove the child's age, even if it's just written down, they can and are legally obligated to enroll in school if they are living in the U.S. However, with Milagro now out of school, his aunt was having a harder time controlling him, and he started getting in more and more trouble. After being expelled in a 1-month period, Milagro was arrested on 3 separate occasions for burglary and once for throwing a rock through a car window. The cases were always dealt with in the juvenile justice system, and since he was under 18 years old, he wasn't pressed for not having identification. It was later said that U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement tracks everyone booked into the Palm Beach County Jail where Milagro was living. They check for matches in a database of illegal immigrants, but since he was in the juvenile facility, he flew under the radar. The final straw that broke the camel's back was when Milagro allegedly tied up his 3-year-old cousin and placed him in a shopping bag because he was angry with his aunt. So after that, with Milagro constantly getting in trouble, kicked out of school, no way to work, and now her little boy, she basically just told him, get the hell out. Now, it seemed like maybe she said this just in anger and expected him to come back, because a couple of weeks later, his aunt reported him as a runaway. After Milagro was kicked out of his aunt's house, he started couch surfing and spending a lot of time at the local basketball courts. And that's where he became good friends with 16-year-old Eddie Taylor, Lisa's son. So when Lisa found Milagro sleeping in her car, she felt horrible for this little boy, who definitely sold her a sob story. He told her that he was unable to go to school due to not having the legal documentation, and conveniently decided to leave out that he had actually been enrolled in school and expelled. So Lisa believed that without the proper documents, he really couldn't go to school or get a normal job, and he told her that his aunt had banished him from her home and was refusing to feed him or provide anything for him. So of course, Lisa, being the kind-hearted person that she was, felt like she had no choice but to help this boy, who was sent here from another country and essentially abandoned by his mother and now abandoned by his only family. Even though they already had a full house, she welcomed Milagro to stay with them. So when Michelle came over to visit with Lisa, she wasn't at all surprised that her best friend had taken in a needy kid. It was in Lisa's nature to help anyone who was struggling, and Michelle had been there before herself. Milagro barely had anything other than the clothing on his back, so she decided to help out by collecting a bunch of clothing that her boyfriend wasn't wearing anymore, and she got this for Milagro to wear. Soon it was like he was just another one of the family members. He and Eddie played video games and basketball, and he didn't just sit around and do nothing in Lisa's house. He cleaned, he did dishes, and after staying there for several months, he even started babysitting the younger kids. So at that point, Lisa had a 1-year-old baby, and Milagro really seemed good with kids. I'm not sure if she wasn't aware of his burglary charges, or maybe she figured he only did that because he had no other way of providing for himself. But regardless, he had earned the family's trust and became just like another one of her sons. In the summer of 2005, it wasn't uncommon for Michelle's daughter, Lachele, who was then 8 years old, to spend the night at Lisa's house on weekends. That way, Michelle could work and do things while Lachele played with the other kids and spent time with her godmother, Lisa, as well. So on Saturday, May 21st, 2005, Lachele came over to Lisa's house for their usual weekend sleepovers. Now, by that point, she was very familiar with their added family member, Milagro. Milagro and Eddie hung out and played video games, and Lachele played with the baby and just had a typical Saturday with Lisa before everybody went to sleep for the night. The house was quiet until around 2 or 3 a.m. when Lisa's older daughter Danielle got home from being out with her friends. Danielle went in to check on the baby and realized that Lachele wasn't in bed where she usually slept. She went and shook Lisa awake and told her that she didn't know where Lachele had gone. Now Lisa was confused because she saw Lachele asleep in bed with the baby hours before. Lisa and Danielle looked all around the house and they tried not to panic. They thought that maybe Michelle had come to pick her up for some reason or another, but when they saw Lachele's shoes still sitting by the front door, Lisa started to get very nervous. She decided to call Michelle to ask if she had picked her up. Now, of course, because Michelle had not picked her up, she immediately started to panic because it became clear that no one knew where Lachele had gone. Michelle said, "I'm on my way immediately," before hanging up the phone, and Lisa dialed 911 for help. It didn't take long for Michelle and for police to arrive at Lisa's home. It was just a minute later that Milagro, who Lisa hadn't even noticed was gone from where he usually slept on the couch, came barreling in the front door. And Milagro was out of breath, disheveled, and had a rip on his shirt. He told Lisa, Michelle, and the police that at around midnight, a white man had come bursting through the door, grabbed Lachele, and made off with her with a car that was waiting outside. He said that the car drove away, but he tried to help Lachele by chasing down the car and ran almost 8 blocks. Surprisingly, according to Milagro, he caught up to the car, but when he did, 3 other men exited the vehicle and jumped him. He said they punched him, kicked him to the ground, and beat him up for over 20 minutes before jumping back into the car and driving away with Lachele. The detectives who had arrived on the scene asked Milagro what type of car the kidnapper was driving, and he said it was an old station wagon with a dent on the side of it. That was when Michelle and Lisa started to feel a little off about his story, because an old dented station wagon just happened to be the same type of car that was broken down in the driveway. So it would have had to have been a pretty crazy coincidence for that exact type of vehicle to be what Lachele was kidnapped in. And the police also noticed that other than the rip in his shirt, Milagro had no other visible injuries. They all figured that after being attacked by 3 men for 20 minutes, you'd probably have at least some bruises, maybe some scrapes, a few cuts. It also just seemed a little bit implausible that Milagro would have been able to catch up with a car by running 8 blocks. You'd think a car transporting a kidnapped victim would have probably been trying to get away from the scene as quickly as possible, especially if somebody was running behind them. However, even though there were obvious holes in his story, they really had nothing else to go off of. Things also got a little scarier when the investigators found a broken off knife blade in the driveway. Before dawn, there were dozens of officers and searchers scouring the Lake Worth area for any sign of Lachele. Detectives looked for any small sign of breaking and entering, anything potentially dropped in the house, or something that could point to who had taken Lachele. Even though most of them started to feel like Milagro's story didn't just quite add up, the fact was he was at the house and Lachele was gone. Regardless of who had taken her, they had to find her, and they had to find her fast. The good thing was that if it was Milagro, he couldn't drive, so she more than likely wouldn't be far away. So they focused their search on Lisa's neighborhood, with some searching the nearby park and others searching a cemetery down the road. When it got light outside, 2 detectives decided to go check out an abandoned landfill just a few blocks away from the house. The landfill, which was no longer in use, had an access road that had been gated off. So the 2 detectives opened the gate and began driving down the access road and stopped when they noticed something. In the middle of the road, there appeared to be a couple of items of clothing. So one of the detectives got out, and he was horrified when he realized that the clothes were a small pair of colorful girls' underwear with butterflies on them, and a pair of blue pajama shorts. The detectives realized that Lachele was more than likely somewhere in that landfill, and based on the knife and her clothing, they were losing optimism about finding her alive. Now, by that point, no one was certain how long Lachele had actually been gone, and all they had was Milagro's account. The police had issued an Amber Alert and had asked the community to look out for 3 white men with a young girl matching Lachele's description, but they were pretty positive that there were no men and that she wasn't far. With the clock ticking, the 2 detectives who found the clothing made their way through the landfill. They came across 2 huge blue construction trash bins, which are basically like long dumpsters. The bins were empty, other than one that had some yellow recycling bin inside of it. Now, that recycling bin was the type that you would see in a residential area with a flip top and wheels that people usually bring their trash out or their recycling out to the curb. So one of the detectives jumped inside the big dumpster and flipped open this lid, and inside, there bizarrely were tons of huge broken off pieces of concrete. You don't typically see someone throwing away broken concrete, especially when you're in a landfill and can just dump it literally anywhere. So he started removing a couple of the pieces of the extremely heavy and jagged pieces of concrete. And his heart absolutely sank when he saw a little hand and a little foot sticking out from underneath. At that point, the officer just knew that there was no way that Lachele could be alive. So they called in for assistance and told them what they found. Not even minutes later, Lisa, Michelle, and their families were gathered in the living room, and they were alerted that a body was found in the landfill. Basically, all of the officers that had been frantically searching for Lachele arrived at the old Lake Worth landfill and began taping off the scene. The investigators all surrounded the huge dumpster to support each other during the horrific task of recovering Lachele's little body. The lieutenant got into the dumpster and he cried as he started removing more of the 30-pound pieces of concrete. He realized that Lachele was in the fetal position, with her head facing down. Now, just when it seemed like this was going to be one of the saddest days of their careers, the lieutenant saw something that absolutely shocked him. He thought his eyes were playing tricks on him when he actually saw one of Lachele's fingers start to move. The movement was slight, but the brief glimmer of hope caused more officers to jump into the bin and frantically start pulling more concrete off Lachele. She was partially undressed, badly hurt, and clinging to life, but she was alive. Quickly, first responders rushed over and got Lachele on a stretcher so that she could be taken to the hospital. Before being placed into the ambulance, one of the detectives gently asked her, "Who did this to you?" And barely able to get any words out, Lachele whispered, "Milagro." The family being notified that Lachele was actually alive after just being told that she was found dead was one of the most traumatizing moments, but relieving and miraculous and emotional and just a complete roller coaster. Milagro was immediately brought into the police station until they could get more information from Lachele. But even in the state that she was in, she was able to say with no doubt that he was the one who did this. After initially talking with police and being seen by a doctor, it was determined that Lachele had been in that bin, upside down, covered in 200 pounds of concrete for nearly 8 hours before she was found. The doctors said that all of her organs were in the process of shutting down, and if she had been found just 10 to 15 minutes later, she would have been dead. Even though she was badly injured, Lachele still mustered up the courage to speak with the police with her mom by her side. Now, before I get into what she told the police, I want to warn you that it may be extremely disturbing to some of you. Lachele told detectives that she was asleep when she was woken up by somebody touching her. When she opened her eyes, she saw Milagro standing above her. Lachele got out of bed confused about what was going on, and Milagro told her to come outside because he needed to show her something. Lachele was only 8 years old, and she knew and trusted Milagro. So she went outside with him. When they got to the driveway, Milagro held up a knife to her and told her that if she screamed, he would hurt her. Lachele was still confused about what was going on, but she realized that Milagro was not acting like his usual self. He forced Lachele at knife point to walk the several blocks away to that abandoned landfill, with no shoes on, no socks on the asphalt, and then God knows through what else she had to walk through once they got inside the gates. I just imagine being in a landfill, there being glass, nails, all sorts of things that can hurt your feet, and he could have at least let her get her shoes. So once they got deeper inside, Milagro all of a sudden slammed Lachele to the ground and started punching her repeatedly. Lachele did her best to scream and fight back, but the more he punched her and slammed her, the weaker she became. At some point, she came to the realization that no one would be able to hear her where they were. Milagro then ripped off Lachele's shorts and her underwear, and he violently attacked her in a horrific and sexual way, violating this 8-year-old girl. Milagro then began choking her, and even though she was only 8 years old, some instinct in her told her to play dead. So Lachele closed her eyes, held her breath, and after a few seconds, Milagro let go. He bent down beside her and she continued to hold her breath, and her plan worked because he was convinced that he had killed her. So she stayed limp as he picked her up from the ground and then threw her over his shoulder. He walked further into the landfill, and suddenly Lachele remembers him throwing her into a bin and then slamming the lid shut. She was terrified, but she knew that remaining still as possible was her only chance at survival, and she did her best to stay in that same position as he began rolling the bin. So in the police statements and in Lachele's statement, she remembers Milagro stopping the bin, opening the lid, and then throwing the huge pieces of concrete on top of her. Lachele said she remembers hearing him laugh, but also hearing him saying, "I'm sorry," after each heavy stone landed on her. It is just so amazing that while she was literally being crushed by 200 pounds of jagged rocks, essentially, she remained quiet and remained still. When the bin was full, Milagro rolled it until he came up to that huge dumpster. Now, this is the part that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, because the reports say that Milagro then picked up the bin and threw it into the dumpster, but I just don't see how it would be physically possible for a 17-year-old to lift a heavy bin with an 8-year-old and 200 pounds of rocks inside of it high enough to throw into a dumpster. So then I was thinking maybe he threw the bin in with Lachele in it in the dumpster first, and then went and got the concrete to put on top of her. But still, if you've ever pushed or pulled one of those trash bins, you know that they're heavy. To me, it would be incredible for him to lift the bin with her in it, even without the rocks. So then I was thinking maybe he put the bin in the dumpster earlier, or maybe it happened to already be in there, but Lachele says she remembers being rolled in the bin, and the officers say that he threw it in. Maybe they saw the wheel tracks, I'm not sure, and it could also be that he hopped into the dumpster and then pulled it with the handle like over and in. Maybe that would be easier than lifting it. And I guess at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, because either way, she ended up in that bin covered in concrete. I was just wondering if maybe during his psychotic frenzy, he got some sort of adrenaline strength or something and was able to lift all of that, or how that really happened. So after Milagro thought that he had concealed her well enough, he walked and grabbed her underwear, grabbed her shorts, and then dropped them in the road on his way back to the house. He probably wasn't expecting anyone to have noticed that she was gone so soon and started to panic when he saw police at the house, so he made up that ridiculous kidnapping story. Incredibly, Lachele held on for 8 agonizing hours, going between despair that no one would find her and hope that someone would. Just before she was about to lose consciousness, Lachele said that she could hear someone crying, and through some of the air pockets and the holes in the rocks, she did her best to wiggle her finger and prayed that the person would see her. Now here is just a small portion of the detective's interview with Lachele.
You can start right from the very beginning.
Tell us everything.
Tell us exactly what happened. What did he try to do, or what did he do? Speak up, baby.
They took me around the park. Nothing. Stop laughing. What did I ever do to you? And you keep saying, shut up. Shut up.
It's okay.
It's okay. What
It's okay.
I was trying to say help, but I couldn't.
The main reason I wanted to play that clip is because I feel like the detectives were kind of pushy, considering that she was just a child who had just been through a horrible ordeal. I think those two may have needed some training on how to speak to children, but regardless, Lachele proved to be extremely brave and told exactly what happened to her. A grand jury indicted Milagro on counts of attempted first-degree murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery against a person under 12 years old, and he was held without bail until trial, where he would be tried as an adult. After being confronted with the evidence and the statements made by Lachele, Milagro ended up confessing to the police. However, his defense was going to claim that due to his mental capacity, he was unfit to stand trial. Imagine that. In 2006, after psychological evaluations, the defense told the court that Milagro's mental capacity fell between the maturity range of a 7 to 9-year-old child. He also argued that Milagro had several mental impairments due to his mother's addiction during pregnancy. 2 out of 3 mental health professionals who examined Milagro couldn't agree on a possible autism diagnosis, but did agree that he was incompetent to stand trial. The judge ordered that he be placed in juvenile rehabilitation facility for 6 months until he could be reevaluated and deemed competent. Finally, in 2009, Milagro was deemed competent to stand trial, and he, the defense, and Lachele's mother actually agreed on a plea deal of 25 years, but the judge denied it and said that the case was going to trial. Even though he was now competent, Milagro's team still tried their hardest to push an insanity defense. However, the jurors rejected these claims, and he was found guilty on all charges. The defense asked the judge for leniency after it had come out that Milagro was diagnosed with an advanced kidney disease, and he actually had to be given a pacemaker and put on dialysis. A doctor gave him a life expectancy of about 15 years, and he hoped to one day be able to return to the Bahamas. However, the judge handed down 4 life sentences plus 45 years. Unfortunately, 2 years later, the Supreme Court ruled that life sentences for juveniles for crimes other than murder were cruel and unusual, and Lachele had to endure a resentencing hearing all over again. She had already been through so much with her physical and emotional hearing, and reopening the wound after she felt like she had finally gotten justice was extremely difficult for her. But Lachele proved once again that she is incredibly brave, and this time, she decided to speak in court at the resentencing. Before Lachele addressed the court, Milagro's aunt, the one that kicked him out, spoke to the judge, and she said he's always been a special boy. He just doesn't understand. He does a lot of things he doesn't understand. However, Lachele explained that it's actually her that's been given a life sentence in all of this, and that Milagro stole her life and her childhood.
Honestly, I feel like they're trying to make him seem like he's a victim because they keep saying about his condition, and that honestly has nothing to do with it. What he did was his decision. No one put a gun to his head, no one made him do it. And they keep saying he has the mind of a 7-year-old. What 7-year-old you know will kidnap a child, try to choke her to death, and bury her in the rocks?
He tried to choke you. He choked you, right?
He tried to choke me. Yeah.
How did he try to do that? What did he do?
Put his hands over my throat and he was strangling me.
And for how long did he do
He
that?
did that for he did it over and over again for, I don't know how long, for a very long time. And I don't know how I got the idea in my head to fake my death.
You pretended, what do you mean by you faked your death?
Pretend that I held my breath. He would choke me and then he would let me go to see if I reacted. And it's at the first couple of times when I reacted, moving, trying to breathe, he would do it again. Because he noticed he didn't do what he planned to do. And so I just once he threw me back down on the ground, I just laid there.
So did you at one point then start pretending like you weren't breathing or like you were dead?
Yes.
Once you started to do that, what did he do?
He carried me to the other side of the landfill and he threw me into a yellow bin and he placed concrete on top of me.
Were you able, did you try to get out after he left?
I mean, I couldn't move.
You aware how many pounds were on you? 200 pounds, 186 pounds, I think.
And I couldn't move at all. I was stuck, and
how long were you in there before someone found you?
the next morning, I think at 10.
Did you think you were going to die?
Yeah.
Were you scared?
Yeah.
It was pretty brave of you to stand up there. I know you've done it before, but what goes through your head when you have to stand up there and talk to the judge about what happened and in front of him?
Honestly, what goes through my head is that I just want them to see, what he did was wrong, and he deserved to do his time and pay for what he did.
So you've said you don't think he should get out. Why not?
Because I feel like even though I have freedom, I still suffer. So I feel like he should suffer too for what he did. I want him to sit and think about what he did.
Do you think 40 years is enough? 40 more years?
No, I honestly don't.
So I know you say it's tough a lot, but you seem so strong. You seem very strong.
I mean, as time go by, you really have no choice but to be strong. Because I feel like if I just let myself go and let it power over me, I feel like he won.
Before the new sentence, the judge said he took her to the darkest, desolate place, and it's not bad enough that he sexually attacks her, but then he throws pounds of concrete on her. He doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't understand, acts like a child. He knew enough to cover up the crime. The judge, who was clearly not a fan of the new Supreme Court ruling, handed down a 70-year sentence, which is basically just a different way of phrasing a life sentence. However, just a year later, the sentence again was thrown out on appeal for being cruel and unusual. In 2016, Lachele had to go to a third and final sentencing, where he was given a 50-year sentence with credit for time served, which at the time was about 10 years. So he will be eligible for a judicial review in the year 2036. Now, I'm really curious to know what you guys think about this case, because I was very surprised that I hadn't seen more coverage about this case, because Lachele's story of survival was an absolute miracle. And actually, when she was originally rescued, she was nicknamed Miracle Girl because of her story. After Lachele took her own time to heal and recover, she actually started her own nonprofit called Many Girls Like Us, which was a way to help support other young victims of kidnapping and physical or sexual harm. I think this story is so inspiring, and I thought it would be nice to finally talk about a case with a happy ending, or a version of a happy ending. Lachele seems to be thriving in her life, and I hope she knows that while she is a miracle, her survival depended on her own bravery and her own strength as well. Not many people would have been able to survive that, and she did. I also want to know what you think of this little twerp's sentence. I can't believe that he is eligible for a review in just 13 years, and I can't believe that the sentence was appealed so many times. This guy, adult, almost adult, brutally and sexually targeted an 8-year-old. That should have the harshest of punishments, in my opinion. But what do you think? Thanks so much for tuning in with me on today's episode, guys. If you appreciated the case coverage, please give this video a thumbs up on your way out. And until the next case, stay safe. Bye.